To our previews for the Sunday slate of games. We will start with that Philadelphia Eagles New Orleans Saints game. One that has a whole lot of intrigue. And right, obviously with what Ian was saying, not likely to see A.J. Brown. Anybody that maybe gets a little bit of boost from that in that Philly offense.
Devontae Smith has always just feasted whenever A.J. Brown has not been there for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm going to say that it's a start for Devontae Smith. Obviously, he has had 22 targets and 224 yards and a touchdown in 2 career games without A.J. Brown. And we heard from Mike Garafolo earlier this week, who was at the game with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was saying that Jahan Dotson was getting wide open and they just weren't looking his way. And by they, I mean Jalen Hurts. So I anticipate this going to Devonta Smith a lot. So if you do have him, you play him.
A.J. Brown was my most drafted first-round pick this year. I am very sad. But if you're like me and you need an injury replacement, start Rashid Shaheed, because why would you not right now? He has been a top 15 fantasy wide receiver each game this season. The Eagles have allowed not only the 3rd most fantasy points per game and the 2nd most touchdowns to wide receivers, but they have shown us that they can be had on the long ball this year. And that is something I know Marcus has spoken about a lot this week, that his shortest touchdown is 19 yards. He is a huge big play threat every time he steps on the field. The floor might be low, but if you need an injury replacement or something like that, swing for the fences, and no one hits more home runs than Rashid Shaheed.
Talking about Rashid Shaheed, somewhere Patrick Claybon's ears are burning. He's got a smile in his heart as we talk about this. The Baltimore Ravens looking for their first win of the season, taking on the Dallas Cowboys. And Florio, seems like the fans of America's team might not be too happy with what you got right now.
Yeah, I know I'm going to upset a lot of people in Texas right now, but I think you sit Dak Prescott in fantasy this week, partially because Dak hasn't really looked like Dak so far this year. He has failed to reach 13 fantasy points in a game this season and has just 1 passing touchdown in each of his 2 games, but it's also largely because of the matchup. The Ravens generate pressure at a very high rate. They have allowed just 2 passing touchdowns this season. They have kept Patrick Mahomes in check in week 1, holding him to just 15 fantasy points. And in their last 14 games, nearly a full season, 1 quarterback has reached 18 fantasy points against them. So with the floor and ceiling being a little in question right now for Dak, I think there'll be plenty of weeks to start him. But against the Ravens, I would play it safe and go in another direction.
You know, on the other side, I know a lot of folks are looking at Derrick Henry because the Cowboy run defense has not been great. But I would also tell you to not sleep on Justice Hill, mostly because of the usage. In both games this season, Hill has played more snaps than Derrick Henry. He's being used heavily in the passing game, targeted on about 30% of his routes. And not only is he getting the long down and distance snaps and the 2-minute work, which we figured out in week 1, he's also splitting kind of the short down and distance snaps with Henry as well. So when John Harbaugh said we didn't bring Derrick Henry in here to give him 30 carries a game, we all kind of sneered at that. But apparently through the first 2 weeks of the season, they absolutely meant it. So we can't completely rule out Justice Hill getting a good opportunity in this game against the Cowboys. Game that could be the track meet of the week. The Detroit Lions head down to the desert to take on the Arizona Cardinals. And you're saying nice things about a Lion today.
Why wouldn't I? Well, he's a Bear.
Oh, that's true.
David Montgomery, former Bear, going up against a former Chicago team in the Arizona Cardinals. I'm absolutely starting David Montgomery. The totals on the board are correct. 17 touchdowns in 19 games. And David Montgomery still leads the team in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns this season. The Cardinals have allowed 3 rushing touchdowns this year. That's tied for the 3rd most. So, yeah, again, I know sometimes these backfield situations get a little bit muddled, but Dan Campbell has done a really nice job through the course of his career, mixing in his goal line back, going back to Jamal Williams, now David Montgomery. David Montgomery should be a start each and every week.
Yeah, one of those backfields you talked about where 2 guys can be successful at the same time. It can happen. On the other side, because I think we are contractually obligated, thanks to researcher Laquan Jones, to mention Greg Dortch at least once a show, here we go. Here's your Greg Dortch sleeper opportunity here. Look, he had the good week 1. Didn't do anything in week 2 because it was the Marvin Harrison Jr. week, and it seems like everybody just moved on from Greg Dortch. I don't really understand that, but I think last week was a question of game script because the Cardinals got up so big, they just ran the football. He's been targeted on about 1/3 of his routes this season, and according to Fantasy Points data, he's the first read on about 22% of Arizona's passing plays. This is a good opportunity because the Lions have struggled to cover slot targets this year, and that's where Greg Dortch does a lot of his work. I think he has a bounce back in week 3. On to the Houston Texans. and the Minnesota Vikings. That Vikings defense gave the 49ers fits last week. So, Florio, any way that the Texans maybe can crack Brian Flores' attack?
Yeah, we go from one short wide receiver to another, and I think you start Tank Dell partially because anytime a player is my size and named Tank, I have to root for them. But I know it has been a disappointing start to the year so far, but Dell has ran the second most routes for the Texans, which is a good thing because we had questions about what his involvement would be. And NFL Pro has intermediate and deep passing as an advantage for the Texans in this game. Dell is second in targets and yards on those passes as Diggs gets used more in the short game. So if they're trying to win downfield a little bit, I think Tank Dell will be the one they go to.
On the other side, I'm telling you this right now, Sam Darnold, don't sleep on Sam Darnold. I know everybody likes to laugh. He was a punchline coming into the season, but he's been very good the first 2 weeks. You see that there, 2 passing touchdowns in each game this season. Derek Carr, who also was kind of a fantasy punchline, the other quarterback who has pulled that off. Look, I don't think that the Texans are going to rack up 7 sacks against Darnold and the Vikings this week. And because Houston has been so good against the run, I think it's going to be hard to establish with Aaron Jones, which means they go to the air. Also keep an eye. Look, Jordan Addison working his way back. If he is available, that's one more weapon for Darnold to work with. In a game that could be sneakily high scoring, I think Darnold is worth putting in some lineups in week 3. All right, more game previews all this hour on with a little bit of Sunday night action. Rank, Travis Kelce has not been the greatest start for him fantasy-wise. Have you lost faith?
Not at all. He's absolutely a must-start this week for the Kansas City Chiefs. As a matter of fact, let's go to my single reel here. Or no, just roll the video. Do that as well. Listen, I want to drive home a point, but here's the thing is everybody's trying to figure out which running back they're going to go to, Carson Steele or Samaje Perine, or if it's going to be Priest Holmes. I don't know. Here's my thing. The guy they're going to turn to, Priest Holmes was a running back for the Chiefs a long time ago. People won fantasy leagues with him. But here's my thing. They got to go to Travis Kelce. He is going to be the person that they rely on the most. I know that it's not always a one-for-one like, well, one running back's gone, we go to the next guy, which in some cases is true, but Travis Kelce is the guy that holds this team together. They have to count on him. He has to come through. With Isaiah Pacheco coming out, it has to be Travis Kelce. So keep the faith. He's going to be just fine.
Another struggling tight end, and last I checked, this is Fantasy Live, so we have to talk about Kyle Pitts. I know outside of that first week touchdown, it's been disappointing, but last week I was screaming at my TV when he was running across the middle of the end zone wide open, and Kirk Cousins just did not see him. But this is about the matchup. Kansas City has allowed the most receiving yards to tight ends. They have the highest EPA when targeted allowed to tight ends. We saw Isaiah Likely absolutely eat against them in week 1. The Bengals made a very concentrated effort to get Mike Gesicki the ball against them in week 2, and he finished with 91 yards. This is the week. If Kyle Pitts disappoints in week 3, then it's time that we have to have a conversation, but there's no way I'm getting him out of my lineup in this one.
All right, so we've checked the Greg Dortch box. We've checked the Kyle Pitts box. I think we've hit a lot of our prerequisites for this show already. Moving on to the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams, 2 teams that come limping into week 3 because of a variety of injuries. And because of that, I like Jauan Jennings this week as a sleeper. We mentioned this on the hype train earlier in the week. Look, there was a period of time during the Super Bowl when it looked like Jauan Jennings was going to be the MVP because he was doing a little bit of everything. Now we know the Niners, obviously without Christian McCaffrey, without Deebo Samuel as well. George Kittle did miss practice earlier in the week. This could be a situation where the Niners have to lean on somebody else in the passing game besides just Brandon Ayuk. Jennings, a guy who, look, 3rd and Jauan was a real thing for this Niners offense. The Ram defense has been beaten up. They are getting torched every which way you can imagine. So don't be surprised if you see Brock Purdy going toward Jennings quite a bit this week.
Yeah, you like Jennings. I think Brandon Ayuk goes absolutely off this week, which means start Brock Purdy. I know he hasn't looked like the Brock Purdy, at least fantasy-wise, from last season, but the Rams have just absolutely been torched this year by speed, and the 49ers have plenty of it. This year, the Rams have allowed the most yards per attempt, 3rd most passing touchdowns, and 4th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Also, Purdy has taken a lot of sacks this year. The Rams do not get after the quarterback well, so I think this is a bounce-back performance for Brock Purdy.
All right, we've got Dolphins and Seahawks, Miami traveling up to the Pacific Northwest, which, don't check my math on this, I think this is probably the longest trip you can take, right?
Listen,
Probably.
don't do this.
What?
We're making a big deal about that. Like, Seattle does this all the time.
I'm not saying it's a big
nobody
deal.
Says anything.
I'm just merely.
The Dolphins have to travel.
I'm just pointing out the fact that it's. I'm just pointing out the fact that it's a long trip. That's all I'm saying. It's a long.
But they never say that for poor Seattle.
No,
they choose to live in Seattle.
They choose to live in Miami.
It's a beautiful place.
Anyway,
awful
who are we
baseball
starting?
team, but good place. Hey. Listen, I got to say, Zach Charbonnet. Here's my thing. No, everybody's like, oh, poor Miami. Like, Seattle does this all the time. Seattle also runs the ball a ton, too. And last week, without Kenneth Walker III, they went to Zach Charbonnet almost 100% of the time. There was like nobody else. They were not pulling Kurt Warner out of the stands to go out there. There was actually a player named Kurt Warner. With a C. Yeah. Back in the day.
Did not know
but in any event.
Were those jerseys for real?
Yeah, exactly. But they're in the AFC West. Zach Charbonnet, if Kenneth Walker is there, I'm concerned a little bit. But if it's the Zach Charbonnet show, 100% you're going with him. The Dolphins don't stop anybody rushing-wise.
A lot of what Rank said went over my head, but I agree to start Zach
Seattle's
Charbonnet.
on the West Coast. You're like, what?
I agree. I think you start his teammate, JSN, this week. I think we're going to look back at week 2 of 2024 and be like, yeah, that is the week that JSN just completely broke out. On the year, he has a 27% target share. It was 37% last week. 85% of his routes come from the slot, and that is important because the Dolphins have allowed a whole bunch of production to slot receivers. As long as he's getting this kind of volume, and it looks like he has firmly surpassed Tyler Lockett in the target pecking order there, I think you could start him, and this is a good matchup. I'm fine starting JSN.
Yeah, JSN moving up the trust tree. You love
DJ Moore. Believe it or not, yeah, if you could get the Colts to fear the run, this will open it up for DJ, who already leads the team in target share. Keenan Allen has been ruled out for this weekend and won't make the trip. I really do believe that that's how you get things right with the Chicago Bears offense that has not gotten off to a great start this season. So when you see that team moving the ball on the ground, using the play action, they will take advantage of DJ Moore, and he will have a great game this week.
I have to start DeAndre Swift in a couple places. So, yeah, listen to what Rank is saying right now and run the ball this weekend. On the other side, I think Alec Pierce, or as my autocorrect likes to call him, Alex Pierce, is a sleeper this week. He is one of just 5 wide receivers with a touchdown in each game this year, and he currently leads the NFL in fantasy points per opportunity. He also, what I love, leads the Colts in deep targets. I believe he is just the best fit of the Colts wide receivers to fit Anthony Richardson's skill set. And if you're like me and you have teams loaded with hurt players like A.J. Brown and Cooper Kupp, you want a high upside replacement. I am plugging Alec Pierce into a lot of lineups and hoping for the best this week.
Second best Alec behind Guinness, for sure. Moving over to the Giants and the Browns, and looking at the Browns offense, it has not been really great, but a great matchup here. And I do think that D'Onta Foreman has some sleeper value. Look, you got Ricky Wild Thingvaughn. You got Emmanuel Clase. You got D'Onta Foreman. That's a list of Cleveland closers because we saw Foreman take over as the lead running back in the second half last week. Keep an eye on that offensive line. Jack Conklin working his way back. Jedrick Wills was limited in practice earlier in the week, so they could have their tackles back, which should make an impact in the running game. Going against a Giants defense that got torched by Aaron Jones in week 1, got run through by Brian Robinson Jr. in week 2, and if the Browns can get a lead, I think we're going to see kind of a mix between Jerome Ford and D'Onta Foreman, but Foreman looking like the guy who might be able to close that game out.
I hate to say it, but Ricky Vaughn was a starter who was brought in to close in that one game.
Well, he became the closer.
He wasn't the official closer.
That's true.
Here's the thing, though. Amari Cooper hasn't been closing anything for us fantasy-wise, but I'm going to start him this week against Florio's Giants, a team that has not been able to slow anybody down this year, although except for when Jaden Daniels is throwing the ball. Then they looked great. But I do think they'll get it going this week against them. I do hope that we see a little bit more from him because I'm shocked that Amari Cooper has not been better. I thought that this was going to be a perfect match for him, that he was going to do what he did in Dallas and just kind of help revitalize this offense. That hasn't been the case. I'm giving him one more chance. Like, this is it, Amari. If not, I'm going to have to throw you into the bench. But like the coach said there, the manager said there in Major League, he's due.
There are a lot of other things he said, too, that I
There's a lot of things I
can't repeat on this show.
I almost said one on the air the other day, but that's a story for another day.
Speaking of teams wearing orange, you got the Broncos and the Buccaneers. Game brought to you by Minute Maid, because, orange or whatever. Floria, it's been pretty great for the Buccaneers offense so far this season. Anything making you maybe shy away from that this week?
I was going to try to make a Major League reference. I've never seen the movie, so I'm just kind of left out of the fun here. But I have seen Chris Godwin play, and he's a must-start option right now. He is the wide receiver 1 on the season, and he is the only wide receiver this year to score at least 22 fantasy points in both games. He currently has the 3rd highest target share in the NFL, and we're talking a lot about elite corners. I expect Patrick Surtain to cover Mike Evans a whole lot this week, and that will lead to Baker Mayfield looking other directions. We've seen that already this season, so this to me looks like it's shaping up to be another big week for Chris Godwin.
The Titans, we saw at the top of the show, or we heard rather, Ian Rappaport talk about Jordan Love being very unlikely to play this week. But on the other side, what are you looking at in the backfield for Tennessee there?
Yeah, Tajay Spears is expected to play, according to Coach Brian Callahan. I still haven't changed my recommendation for Tony Pollard, a player that I will admit was not super excited about coming into this season because I thought this would be more of a split down the middle with both these running backs, but it appears to be Tony Pollard's backfield, so I'd start him in a good matchup against the Packers.
We got the Chargers and the Steelers, 2 teams that really want to run the football, but you're on a wide receiver this week.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the George Pickens game. Last week should have been. He had a 51-yard catch called back. That was a phenomenal throw and catch all around. He had a touchdown call back. That was nearly 14 fantasy points that he had called back due to penalties. He also drew a long pass interference flag on Patrick Surtain. We know that he has the talent. The volume is going his way. He is the only receiver that they use downfield, so I think a big day is coming for George Pickens.
Moving on to the Panthers and the Raiders. We know Andy Dalton will be getting the started quarterback for Carolina, but on the other side, Brock Bowers off to a really good start for Las Vegas. How are you feeling the rookie this weekend?
I am feeling the rookie, and as a matter of fact, let me give you the list of tight ends that I trust more than Brock Bowers this season, and this is my graphics working. Nobody! There's not a single tight end in the NFL right now, fantasy-wise, that I would take over Brock Bowers. I said this during the offseason. This is why I wanted the Raiders to draft him, and Raider Nation scoffed at me. This guy is well above average pass catcher. I know he's tight end in name. I don't care that Michael Mayer was drafted last year early. Brock Bowers has been him. He is a great talent, almost unmatched. You start him each and every week. I have a dynasty league where I have him and Kyle Pitts. I'm flexing him like he's a wide receiver.
I mean, you should be. Him and Devontae Adams have been 1A and 1B in this passing game. And for this week, I think that means you can trust Gardner Minshew against the Carolina defense. I know Antonio Pierce says they want to run the football and they want to get Zamir White a bunch of touches. That's cool. You might not be able to do that because the Raiders have not been set up to run the football effectively. Just 98 rushing yards, fewest in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Panthers allowing 10% completion percentage over expectation. Look, 2 QB leagues for sure. Maybe in deeper leagues, like a 14-team league, maybe you can get Gardner Minshew in there as well. All right.